Hi, people. So the football World Cup, FIFA World Cup, has kicked off in Qatar, the 2022 World Cup, and now this has been controversial for years. The controversy we've heard in recent months has actually been ongoing for years, ever since Qatar won the bid to host the World Cup. It's been controversial. I'm going to start with a very practical point, which hasn't I haven't heard much about, but it would seem to me to be a practical issue. It's the heat. I don't know how players can play comfortably in those sort of circumstances. I mean, it's as I understand it, it can get up to 40 degrees Celsius. So I would have thought that alone would have ruled against its bid. But there you have it. I mean, that's why we've never had an Olympics in the Middle East, among other reasons. And why probably you wouldn't have an Olympics in India either. Not for the same reasons, but India's, can also get very hot because the climatic side of things, when you have teams from around the world, it's significant. Um, but this was already controversial, and it's just become more controversial because of the bizarre speech yesterday by the FIFA president Gianni Infantino, and this was actually the main news on the BBC. So I have two sources open, and as always with these things, I'm going to kind of flip between them. I'm not going to read them totally, but just for context, I'm gonna I'll put links to both of them. One is Sky News and one is the BBC. Analysis. This is by Rob Harris on Sky News. FIFA President Gianni Infantino's rambling tirade was the first own goal of the World Cup. A few years ago, the FIFA president was flattering 2018 World Cup host Russia, and Vladimir Putin, despite the concerns of human rights activists, said, Sky's Rob Harris. Then Russia was banned from this World Cup for invading Ukraine. So there's a precedent to this guy, making the wrong judgment. The first deflection of the World Cup came from Gianni Infantino, maybe even an own goal. The FIFA president, who told the teams to focus on the football, did anything but on the eve of kickoff. The first match, I believe, was between Qatar and Latin American country. I can't recall which it was, but I had it on the top of my mind there. But anyway, he was determined to call out what he perceived as critics' hypocrisy, delivering a moral lecture of his own. There seemed to be a reference to colonialism when he claimed Europeans had no right to criticise Qatar and should be apologising instead for their own conduct for the next 3,000 years. An attempt to show empathy appeared performative when he said bizarrely, Today I feel gay, today I feel like a migrant worker. He even tried to equate his own family's experience migrating from Italy to Switzerland. He was born in Switzerland, apparently, with the workers who came to Qatar for low paid jobs, often in brutal conditions. Very dubious comparison. Countless died prematurely. The lack of post mortem examinations means we will never know the full human cost of Qatar hosting the World Cup with £200 billion of new infrastructure. Mr. Infantino's rambling tirade, lasting more than an hour before questions were taken at the news conference, drew fresh attention to Qatar's suitability as a tournament host. So those journalists had to listen to this tirade for an hour. With no local officials speaking to the media this week, he seemed to be the voice of the Middle Eastern country, even though he's a European himself. But while he dismissed criticism of Qatar, scrutiny he considers to be hypocritical has produced changes leading to improved working conditions for migrant workers. This is a World Cup host implausibly chosen by FIFA 12 years ago. Corruption investigations were fended off by Qatar, ensuring the eight stadiums are now ready to stage 64 World Cup matches and maybe the last international tournament for Portugal star Cristiano Ronaldo and his Argentine rival Lionel Messi. It all starts on Sunday. That's just about the event. Now, looking at the BBC report, this lays out a bit more detail. I watched some of I haven't watched all of it, an hour long, but I've seen the relevant bits basically. So this is from the BBC report. I'm switching between the two, so apologies. I need to scroll down and so on. See, yeah, he's talking about the critics being hypocritical because of colonialism. It's To me, it's the worst sort of whataboutery. I'll come back to that in a minute. He opened by saying, "Today I have strong feelings. Today I feel Qatari. I feel Arab. I feel African. I feel gay. I feel disabled. I feel a migrant worker." Um, in February 2021, The Guardian said 6,500 migrant workers from India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka had died in Qatar since its successful World Cup bid. That's a staggering figure. 6,500 migrant workers. The number is based on figures provided by the country's embassies in Qatar, so the true figure could be even higher. However, the Qatar government said the total was misleading because not all the deaths recorded were of people working on World Cup related projects. Well, it would even if it isn't World Cup related projects, it would show something about the labour rights in the country. If that is the sort of rate of fatalities. Um, the government said its accident record showed there were 37 deaths among labourers at World Cup stadium construction sites between 2014 and 2020, only three of which were work related. Sounds highly dubious. However, the International Labour Organization said that was an underestimate. But anyway, Infantino said, "We have been taught many lessons from Europeans in the Western world. I am European. For what we have been doing for 3,000 years around the world, we should be apologizing for the next 3,000 years before giving moral lessons." It's a strange time frame that he's chosen, 3,000 years. So that's going back to um, the Etruscans. I mean, his history's a bit flawed because if he's talking about European colonialism around the world, accurately, it would be more like, I suppose you could talk about Roman colonialism in North Africa, but if we're talking about the sort of geopolitical colonialism, like really on an international scale, 600 years. So his history's a bit flawed. Um, if Europe really care about the destiny of these people, they can create legal channels like Qatar did, where a number of these workers can come to Europe to work, give them some future, some hope. I have difficulties understanding the criticism. We have to invest in helping these people in education and to give them a better future and more hope. We should all educate ourselves. Many things are not perfect, but reform and changes take time. This one sided moral lesson is just hypocrisy. I wonder why no one recognizes the progress made here since 2016. Yeah, so I'll put a link to the full report. But basically, the drift of this is that this is a guy who's saying it should be about the football, not politics, not criticism. Yeah, he's using a press conference to basically have his say for an hour. Okay, the journalists there had to listen to this rant, and then I don't know how long he took questions for, but to me it reeks of the worst sort of whataboutery. A few things to consider: Qatar is not a little poor, impoverished country. It's one of the richest countries in the world. In fact, in some studies, it is even number one. It even ranks above Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland as the richest country in the world. Um, so that's important because it's not a case of this is a developing country, and progress takes time. Qatar is filthy rich. So I don't really accept this argument that, well, give them time, give them time, give them time. If they could build gleaming skyscrapers, they could respect basic human rights. And I think the way that they treat migrant workers is disgusting. Um, Even before the World Cup has brought attention to it, but all those skyscrapers, never mind the stadiums, all those gleaming skyscrapers, it's literally blood and toil of poor migrant workers, predominantly from South Asia. Um, the way the Gulf states more generally treat migrant workers is appalling. One of my most viewed videos, in fact, is a case of a Filipino maid who was really badly exploited. In I believe it was the United Arab Emirates, and her passport was taken away. There was an influencer. It may have been Bahrain. Quite honestly, they're all as bad as each other. But the point is that that's my most viewed video because people resonated with that. They saw there was clearly a lot of anger around that. I made a case about it. Um, I think it was about 6 years ago now. But here's the problem with Infantino's little tirade. Firstly, it was bizarre saying that he feels gay, and he was saying something about how he used to be bullied. I really don't know what angle he was going down with this, but It just reeked of whataboutery. It reeked of, well, Europeans done bad things in the past, so shut up. You can't say anything. But, the wrongs of European colonialism, how that somehow exonerates how Qatar is treating people today. Now, there's things like the alcohol ban. Some football captains and Infantino said, well, fans could do without alcohol for a few hours. But I think it's more than that. In of itself, I actually broadly agree because it's not the most important thing. The problem is it's not consistent because people can still drink alcohol in the exclusive boxes. So it's sheer elitism. Point one. Point two, Qatar has had 12 years to prepare for this. They knew what it involved, they knew the terms. If they were against alcohol, they should have negotiated that at the very start. So why the sudden U turn now? I think that's underhand. I think it's dishonest. It's like they've waited till the last minute when it's almost like they've said, well, the competition is here now and it can't be stopped. So now we're going to do the U turn. Because if they made that sort of rule early on, they may not have got the competition. So this again points to corruption in FIFA. But I hope Infantino gets a lot of heat for this because I think it's a worse sort of appeasement. This is basically a green light for every anti-West demagogue out there to say, well, the West can't say anything because of colonialism. Therefore, it's a green light for every authoritarian state, every regime that tramples human rights. I mean, the Mail had a piece saying that he was open to North Korea having the World Cup. This is how skewed this guy's thinking is. Um, I have a particularly low opinion of Westerners who go out of the way to serve as cheerleaders and apologists um, for human rights abusers and for regimes that just don't have the same values as liberal Western democracies. And this is not to say the West is perfect, but frankly, I do think it would be hard pushed to find a region of the world, a part of the world, that has a comparatively better record on human rights, transparency, and progress than liberal Western democracies. And I'm talking, comparatively speaking, I'm talking in today's context. You can find all sorts of crimes associated with European colonialism. But we're talking about today. That's why this sort of whataboutery is pathetic. Um, and it made me quite angry, to be honest. Not to mention the gay rights issue. It just gets into the question, why is it major sporting bodies, the Olympics is another one, we never ever learn. Every time a country is given this sort of platform, it's like, well, giving them the attention, giving them this sort of platform will encourage them to reform of their own, pace. Well, what happened in China? Beijing got the Summer Olympics in 2008. It hasn't got better, it's got worse. It's got worse. The Winter Olympics this year as well. So this theory that if a country gets more attention, its human rights record will improve, I think that's a very flawed theory. Um, And is the human rights situation in Qatar going to improve? I hope so, but I'm not overly optimistic. I think it's all prestige. I think it's their opportunity to sort of say this is our showcase to the world. Um, and I'm going to close with a few points. Countries are different. There are different cultures, different contexts. I am not saying that every single country should be like a carbon copy of one another. But I do think the universal rights is it shouldn't be a menu. It shouldn't be a checklist dependent on culture. Something as basic as if you're employed as a construction worker, as a migrant labor, being treated with a basic level of human dignity, not living in dank conditions, not being forced to work in extremely dangerous circumstances with your life barely valued. These are basic things. And it really sickens me when culture is used as an excuse for that. So I think Infantino is a disgrace. I hope he is replaced as FIFA president. I don't particularly follow football, but it is a major sporting event, probably the second biggest in the world after the Olympics. Um, so I just think his whole angle was a disgrace, and I don't know how long he took questions for, but it was a tirade where he got to say what he wanted. But also pretty rich considering, if he really believed the focus should only be on football, then why is he drawing attention to the issue? So all in all, I just think I feel quite strongly that was a disgrace. These sort of false equivalencies and whataboutery. Well, Europeans done this in the past, so they can't say anything about what's happening in Qatar today. Today, the whole point about an event like this is it's to showcase a country. So if there is a serious human rights concerns, it's absolutely valid that they're raised. I don't see why it should be this case of, well, let them just showcase themselves without scrutiny whatsoever. I mean, would Infantino really have a situation where it doesn't matter how serious the allegations are, they can just do as they please? And for him to have the gall to actually point the finger at European countries in the migrant issue. Now, there's heated debate over this between left and right over how we handle the migrant issue, for example, on the English Channel. But fundamentally, I've heard some obscene left wing posts, by the way, saying that all right wingers complain about migration, but they never point to the Western government to cause these problems. Wrong. It's brutal dictators and often political instability that causes the problems. Always blaming the West for the world's problems. It's not only wrong and ignorant, it doesn't actually help solve anything. Um, but yeah, as a Westerner, as a European, I take issue with his false equivalencies and his. I think he's just pandering to the hosts, to be quite honest. Maybe it gets into the corruption of FIFA. Maybe there's a voting mechanism at play whereby if he sucks up enough to the hosts, they'll help ensure he stays on as FIFA president. I don't know. FIFA has a serious corruption problem. I wouldn't put it past that being the situation. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. This is not about Europe having a perfect record, but it's about false equivalency. It's about whataboutery in the wrong context. And it's about Infantino himself being a hypocrite. He's saying just focus on the football, yet he's drawing attention to this. I think it was obscene, and I hope he gets a lot of heat for it.